Alright people, I think it's time for a new intro and a new catchphrase. Let's go. Yo, 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 welcome back to another episode of T-Shizzle with Mac Dizzle. Ooh, welcome back to Charts a la carte with your host, Mac Smarts. Welcome back to TABC with MK, Elemental PC, me, take $1.03, turn it to a brick of cheese. A fat what up and G's. No. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the tech that will get you wrecked. Wait a second, what kind of message is that sending? Yo, 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 what up kids? This is Anal Sis with... Wait a second, this is just getting worse. Alright, well, scratch that. Well, welcome back to another episode of TA with MK. My name is MK, and in today's episode we're going to follow up with what we discussed yesterday, which is the CPI, or Consumer Price Index, which is the formula that's most commonly used to gauge inflation. We're just going to dive a little deeper today to discuss how they calculate that, and how we might be able to spot when it has potentially peaked, and maybe the markets can then begin to see some relief. Now, if you guys are liking the content, as always, please remember to like and subscribe, and let's go. It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK. Alright, just want to quickly preface why I titled this video CPI for Dummies, and it's not because I'm calling you guys dummies. I'm actually referring to myself. Now, I don't want to give you my life story, but just know that growing up, things like politics, economical things, these were just not things that interested me. And only recently, as they've become more pertinent to trading, for obvious reasons with the way the world is and inflation and stuff, I've had to recently take an interest. So, you're about to learn the dumbed down version of what CPI is, or the Consumer Price Index, but I just want to preface that real quick so nobody takes offense. And if you already know what it is, you know what, this probably is not the video for you. Alright, we all know I love my definitions, so we're just going to jump right in and then we'll expound. What is Consumer Price Index? The Consumer Price Index, or CPI, produced by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, is the most widely used measure of inflation. The primary CPI, CPI-U, is designed to measure price changes faced by urban consumers, who represent 93% of the U.S. population. It's an average, though, and doesn't reflect any particular consumer's experience. The CPI is constructed each month using 80,000 items in a fixed basket of goods and services, representing what Americans buy in their everyday lives, from gasoline at the pump to apples at the grocery store, cable TV fees, and even doctor visits. The BLS uses a survey of American families called the Consumer Expenditures Survey to determine which items go in the basket and how much weight to assign to each item. Different items are weighted according to how important they are to the average consumer. For instance, Americans spend more on chicken than tofu, probably because chicken is better, so changes in the price of chicken have a greater impact on the CPI. Alright, so what is the dumbed down version of what we just read? Well, take it this way. Mr. McKay here, I am your urban consumer, just an average American, I'd say middle class, living here in the Northwest, in this great state of Idaho, me and 4 other people. But anyway, I'm not saying the class matters. They probably take all classes into account. But more or less what I mean to say is I'm just your average person, your urban consumer. What did I spend last month on things like my cell phone bill or my internet so that I could play Fortnite, right? What did I spend on Fortnite? We don't want to talk about that. What did I spend on, groceries at the grocery store, a 12-pack of Coke? What did I spend if I did a doctor visit to have my heart checked or my teeth looked at or to see why I couldn't hear out of my right ear, right? What did I spend on things like dresses for my wife on Amazon.com because she got a new job at a bank and, needs to look pretty? What did I spend last month for the average things that I buy, and what am I spending this month, right? All right, with that out of the way, now let's talk about what they mean by when they put more weight on certain items over others, right? And to me, that's pretty simple as well. And what they mean is not all things that we purchase in our day-to-day lives are created equal, right? As prices rise, for example, which is what we're dealing with during inflation, that's what inflation is at its core, right? Is that the prices of, our average, things that we purchase are going up. Well, there's certain items that, obviously we would have to purchase regardless of what the price is. Things like gasoline, things like food. If we do have to go to the doctor, it's not like just because the price of the doctor visit went up, but we're having a heart attack, we're going to go, hey, let's just wait till, inflation comes down and then we'll deal with this heart attack, right? And so what they're saying is that like my Fortnite skin that I bought just so I could look cool when I'm dying to 12-year-old kids online, that's not going to have the same weight as, gasoline that I need to get to and from work and so on, right? Okay, now I'm just going to quickly read what are some of the items that they use in that 80,000, items that they use to calculate the CPI. Indexes are available for major groups of consumer expenditures: food and beverages, housing, apparel, transportation, medical care, recreation, education, and communications, and other goods and services. And it also states for items within each group and for special categories such as services. I'm assuming services could mean a lot of things, but it could be something as simple as your roof is leaking and so you have to pay for someone to come fix that. You're paying for that service. What would that have cost you last month or 3 months ago versus what you're paying for it now? And, so on. Or a service like getting your hair cut, right? You go to the barber shop, they cut your hair. What did that cost last month on average in downtown Chicago? What's it cost this month to get your hair cut in downtown Chicago? All right, so the question is, for a dummy like me, how am I going to take all that information and try to get an idea of potentially when inflation could have peaked and we could maybe start to see some relief and for it to kind of start going this way versus just going this way, right? And that brings me to this chart that I'm going to start with, which is the US oil chart here on TradingView. And why do I start with this chart? Now, I wasn't able to find their exact formula that they use. I'm sure maybe it's ever changing. I don't know if, 1 year or 1 month they weight certain things, higher than others. I'm assuming they would, because you also have seasons in the United States, and certain seasons there's more of this that needs purchased versus that, or whatever it may be. There probably is factors, and I wasn't able to find that for this video. If anybody knows their exact formula or where you can find it, please let me know in the in the comment section. But I'm assuming if that's something you already know, you probably aren't watching this video because you're not a dummy like me. But being a dummy like me, the reason I start on this oil chart is I have to think to myself, what is probably the highest weighted item on there, or at least close, right? It has to be oil, because energy consumption, that is literally what drives our planet, right? In so many ways, whether it's heating and cooling your home, or whether it's the vehicles that transport things. And I'm going to focus a little more on the vehicle side of it, because one thing you have to think about is every single business, right, in the world, basically, whether it's a restaurant or it's a place that's selling, a store, right, or a car dealership, or, anything you can think of, whatever their product or supplies is, they have to receive that via some form of transportation, right? Whether that's a plane, semis on the interstate, a boat on the ocean or river or whatever, right? Trains, I know still, obviously, we have a train here in town that keeps me up at night sometimes. So yes, those still exist in many parts of the world, right? Transporting items to these businesses. And all of these things, all of this transportation requires fuel. And so this is a good gauge to me, this chart, as to potentially when things could peak, right? Because as the price of oil is going up and people are then paying more for the price of oil, then everything that comes along with that goes up as well, right? Because if it costs this much more for the semi to deliver the goods over to this restaurant, well, then the restaurant had to pay more to receive them, so then they have to up the price of their product, which at a restaurant would be their food, that you as the consumer then feels the the negative side of that, where you paid $3 more for a hamburger in 2022 than you were paying for it in 2021, right? Now, the rest of this video is just going to be me kind of thinking out loud, I guess, with you, because again, I am not someone that's an expert on any of this. This is just me talking out loud, kind of sharing with you my thoughts. And I'm not dumb or naive enough or silly enough to think that this one chart on its own, or even the next chart that I'm going to go over briefly, which is wheat, that those two on their own are going to tell me when inflation has peaked and that we're, suddenly going to go to the moon with stocks again, right? I'm not qualified to know that anyway, and I also am not dumb enough to think that's just that simple, right? It's just not. However, because as we just discussed, oil is so important as far as being used in the world, and especially, not especially, but in the case of the CPI, which is the United States, in the United States, we obviously use tons of fuel to transport things around. And, so anyway, going on with that, we could see that back in 2008, this is the weekly chart for U.S. oil, that oil was actually higher than it is now on this chart. It got all the way up to almost 150. As we know, that was the last major recession. And, last time the inflation was as high, well, inflation actually just reached higher than it had been since 2008. But this was the last time inflation was as high as it is now. And clearly oil, as we can see, was skyrocketed. Then, of course, it finally pulled back early 2009, back to kind of some levels of support. And where are we today? Well, we recently peaked our head up. This would have been in March to about 130, right? Here's the way I think of it. It looks to me, especially if we zoom into something like the daily chart, it does look to me like oil could have peaked. I mean, I'm not saying it has, and there's going to be a lot of world factors that could determine this, but it could have peaked. Well, why would we not see inflation peak right then? Well, to me, there's a few reasons for that. Number one, they're tracking the previous month. So, it's a month ago is whenever new inflation data comes out. So the data that just came out yesterday for July, that was actually for June. That was June's month of data, right? It wasn't for the actual month of July. And then beyond that, as this starts to finally come down and businesses, or we'll say gas stations, start to finally be able to pay less to fill up their tanks, for customers to come fill up their tanks, it's going to take a little while for them to finally, I guess, discount the gas price, right? They want to see it come down for an extended period of time, and that will slowly, they will slowly lower those prices. As they slowly lower those prices, then of course the semis that are filling up, that are bringing the products and goods to said businesses, the businesses may wait a few months before they finally pass along the discount to you as the consumer, and you as the consumer is the one where they're coming up with this CPI data, right? They're not coming up with it based off these charts. They're coming up with it based off what me and you are paying for these goods. And so it could take a few months after things peak, even 3 or 4 months, I would imagine, before we finally start to see inflation slowly begin to come down. What I'm looking for is the signs that we've peaked, so I can start to see, is there going to be some relief finally in the markets, or at least some sideways action as we recover from this recession, right? I hate to do this to you, my friends, but we are going to cut you off right there. I don't want this video to be 400 years long, so we're going to do a 2-part series of this, and just to give you a sneak peek of what we're going to discuss in the next video, using some of what we've already talked about as we're trying to decide, is there a way for us to gauge when inflation has peaked, or especially whenever the market is finally comfortable with potentially accumulating again for the next run-up. Well, we're going to look at things like the Amazon and Apple charts. These are some of the companies that were obviously already big back in 2008 as that recession happened. How did they recover? How long did it take them to recover? This may not be the most accurate or popular opinion, but I do believe crypto is going nowhere. I don't think this is the dot-com bubble where we're going to burst and suddenly go to zero or take 10 whole years to recover. It definitely is a possibility, and things would get really ugly if that was the case. But I'm going to work more under the assumption that crypto is here to stay, and Bitcoin being the big daddy of crypto, it's the top coin, obviously, within this niche of crypto. And I think we can maybe use some of these previous companies and how they reacted and how their price action was during the last recession to kind of gauge what Bitcoin may potentially do during this recession, right? And if you guys are liking the content, as always, please remember to leave me a like and also subscribe, and we will catch you guys tomorrow. It's tea.